We're in Siman Ayin Daled. We're up to the Sif Bays, the second Shir in Siman Ayin Daled. We're discussing the halachas of embarking on a trip, on a ship, within a certain amount of time close to Shabbos. So now we're up to Sif Bays. Before we go to Sif Bays, so first look on the bottom over there where it says the Aleph. The Aleph is from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe comments that this issue, one of the issues we mentioned about traveling, one of the issues we mentioned about traveling close to Shabbos was that number one, you're going to be disoriented. Number two, you might have to do malachis and things like that. So the Rebbe says the same exact logic he applies to other things. Okay, so look at the bottom where it says Aleph. He says you should also refrain from scheduling, if possible, medical things, like, for example, let's say he says nituach, which is a surgery, or things like that. You shouldn't schedule them being shishi erev Shabbos kodesh, for sure not on Friday, and also not on Wednesday or Thursday. Now, why shouldn't you do that? Mitzad habilbul, number one. Okay, so number one, all these things that are going to be medical intervention, that you have a choice. Okay, sometimes you don't have a choice, and obviously the Rebbe is not talking about that. You go, God forbid, if someone goes to the hospital and they say you got to come in right now, emergency. So obviously we're not talking about that. We're talking about, sometimes they'll say it's called elective surgery. You could choose when do you want to do it. It's not life-threatening. You could decide when you want to do it. You should make sure to do it if you can the beginning of the week. Why? So the Rebbe continues and he says, number one, mitzad bilbul. Number one, it's going to disorient you. The same way we said, traveling on a ship too close to Shabbos is going to leave you disoriented. So for sure, this will also. And number two, vatsar shenigrem also causes pain. You're going to be in after surgery. God forbid, a person is not in a comfortable situation. So again, your Shabbos is going to be messed up. In addition to that, v'gam machmas hamaloches hakruches ba'atipul ba'yomim shela'achrei nituah. Also, after a person has surgery, depending on what type, obviously, but then there's a lot of things that have to happen after. And those things, a lot of them are basically involving different types of Chilul Shabbos. So, for example, you have, let's say, Bilbo, right? Let's go through them one by one, where he says you're going to be disoriented. So, first of all, if you're in the hospital, right? Imagine a person, it's a longer, you have to be there for a couple of days. Person's in the hospital, so obviously you're very disoriented. You're not in your own space. You're not wearing your own clothing. You're not eating your own food. You're not in your own, situation. So obviously everything's going to be messed up. And number two is a lot of things that have to happen, like post-op stuff that they do. So they come in to check on you, and when they draw your blood, maybe they're checking your this, your that. They wake you up in the middle of the night. So there's a lot of things that are going to have to happen. You might have to sign papers, or someone else might have to sign for you. So there's a lot of malachas that are going to happen that are required when they do happen. But why schedule that if you could do it in the beginning of the week? It could be a person might still be in the hospital. It's possible. I mean, it's a long situation, but if God forbid you are, okay, you planned it as much as you can. But to lechatchila plan it close enough to Shabbos, it will be like the same issue as embarking on a trip too close to Shabbos as well. Now, when it comes to, let's say, pulling teeth, so I did see somewhere where they say that, pulling teeth is a little bit different. Usually the pain goes away relatively pretty quickly. Some people, as we know, went through bigger things, so it could extend itself. So, okay, in those cases, try to do it earlier. But here you see that Rebbe basically taking and applying this concept and saying that the problems that it represented, we don't have now. We don't really go on ships on long trips. For those that go on cruises, maybe you should keep this in mind. Some people say today's cruises are different, they're massive, and they don't have the same issues. But assuming it does, try to leave in the beginning of the week, it looks like. But for sure, when it comes to things that you do have within your control, and the effects will be the same, try to plan in advance. Yeah.
You're allowed to be on a cruise in Shabbos.
Yeah, we didn't say not. Well, let's finish the simon over here. Yeah.
It's the shear. Why is 3 days the shear?
So we said yesterday, it's not that it's a shear that will make a difference, but what it does is, meaning the pile, you might still be the same frazzled or whatever, but the first 3 days of the week, you're not in a zone of preparing for Shabbos yet. You're still floating. Yeah, so the problem is that once you have to start thinking about Shabbos, like we had in the beginning of the Gemara in Sukkah, we were learning over there about when you build your Sukkah early. And we said early is 30 days. Anything before 30 days is not going to be connected to a sukkah. But if it's within 30 days, then it is connected to sukkah. Why 30 days? So we said within 30 days of Yom Tov, you're supposed to start learning the halachas. In other words, once you're in the zone of something, everything is connected to it. So from Wednesday and on, when you're supposed to be preparing for Shabbos, this would be included in your preparations. Okay, now let's go on to Sif Beis. Let me just see if we missed anything. Okay, I think we're good. Sif Beis. Yeah, let's do Sif Beis and then we'll talk about this. Okay. Al hanaharos. Let's say a person is going on a river. Now, a river is not a yam. A yam was an ocean. A river is you have whitewater rafting, I guess, on rivers, white rivers, but generally they're much calmer. You don't have the same like bilbul as we said before. So in this case, mutar lahaflik b'sfina b'kol you can always travel as close to Shabbos as you want, the filu out of Shabbos, even if it's going to be out of Shabbos. Now, and meaning you're going to be on it on Shabbos also. But let's see in a second. Ubavad, we'll come back to the Alter Rebbe's little inclusion in a second, so let's skip that. Ubavad, the condition that the Kitzur says is there won't be any malachas that have to be done. You have to realize the realities of today and the realities of then are very, very different. Think about it then. How did a ship move? It had a sail or they rowed, right? There was no malachas. They didn't have to light fires. Nowadays, everything is electronic. Everything is working with engines. So all of a sudden, you have a lot of malachas. In those days, being on a ship didn't necessarily mean that there was going to be a malacha that would be done. Because what was a boat? It was a boat. It was literally nothing. It was you paddle.
No carrying.
So you could carry on a boat.
No, fish carrying past the thing. By doing full.
Yeah, but you're inside of a boat. Oh, so we'll get to that in a second. But we'll get to Tchum in a second. That's a good point. That's the only thing we still have to deal with. But here he doesn't talk about that. Here he's talking about that you don't have an issue with Tchum Shabbos. You don't have any issues with the malacha. There will be a problem with the malacha. So maybe they had the beginning of combustion engines and they started having a steamboat. Okay, then there will be a problem. But if not, it's not an issue. Even if you have animals pulling the boat, also mutter would be okay. This was generally the way it would work is on a river, they would put animals on either side, cows, and these cows would basically be hooked up to yokes and whatever, and they would pull the boat that had wood or whatever it was on it, and it was you could pull, and when something's on water, you could pull something that weighs who knows how much very easily. So they have the two animals or a few animals. He says even then it's not going to be a problem either. Now, so the few things we want to say. Let's do the Alter Rebbe first, okay? So on Sif Beis, let me just see if there's a. Yeah, there's always so much to talk about. Okay, so let's see what the Alter Rebbe says over here. So over here they bring from the Alter Rebbe like this: that let's say this boat is close to the ground. Okay, in other words, it's a very shallow water. So the bottom of the boat is within 10 tvachim from the floor. How much is 10 tvachim? Do you remember? We spoke about this for Sukkah. 10 tvachim?
3 inches.
About 31 inches or so. Each tefach is about 3 inches, point something. It's about 31 inches. So the size of a table, a little bit taller than a table. So if... Okay, so 10 tvachim means the bottom of the ship is within 31 inches from the floor, which is not very high. Okay, it's a shallow water. And in addition to that, right, so then another issue would be v'raglav, the person himself, his feet, but kol shekin in gufa, and for sure if the rest of his body as well, is gam lamanto me'asara tvachim, is also within 10 tvachim. Okay, so in other words, it's a shallow ship, and he's sitting there, he's very close to the ground. So then, you can't go on that boat if it's going to go outside the tchum of Shabbos, which is not very far if you're in the water, because the last house, the last city border is sudden. It's over, right? You're in the water then. You don't have houses in the water. Now, even if it would have left 3 days before, it doesn't matter when. Tchum Shabbos is still Tchum Shabbos. So you wouldn't be able to do that if it was a very shallow water. Now again, big ships on the sea are not going to have that issue. But on the river, where we said you could go, here you're going to have that problem. Now, let's say your feet and the person for sure is taka within 10 tvachim, then then the Alter Rebbe says, you know what? Even then, there are circumstances when you could still go on that boat if there's a tzayda, if you need to. Now, why does he say this? Because basically, where do we get this whole idea of the Tchum Shabbos? Where do we get this whole idea? No, on Shabbos itself. On Shabbos, to go outside the Tchum. If it's a boat that's high, then there's no problem of Tchum Shabbos. If it's a boat that's close to the ground, then some people say there's a problem, which is why you shouldn't do it. But some people say it's not a problem. And that's why if there's a tzorech, you could. Now, why is there no problem? Because the whole idea of Tchum Shabbos came from the Midbar, when the Yidden were in the Midbar. Now, the river is totally not compared to the way the Yidden were in the Midbar. Now, any place on land is pretty similar, at least that it's land, people could live there. So therefore, we always apply this rule of what we call Tchum Shabbos. However, when it comes to the water, rivers or seas or oceans, where it's totally dissimilar, so we don't really apply the rules of Tchum Shabbos. So if you could, then fine, don't go and travel if it's a low, shallow boat. But if there's a tzorech, if there's a need, then we're not going to be concerned for it because really there's no real problem of Tchum Shabbos. Now, a very similar case we see, there's a sikha where the Rebbe talks about the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Frierdiker Rebbe was offered to leave Galus on a Shabbos. That means the boat was going to leave on a Shabbos. And on a train, the train. And what did the Frierdiker Rebbe say? That no, he wants to wait till the next day, till Sunday. Now, the Rebbe discusses if it's an issue, if a train is similar to a boat or not. And B'Poyel, really, for a train, we would be machmir. Even for those that are mekel about a boat, on a train, they would be machmir because it's daled, at least daled amas wide, or whatever. It goes through a whole thing of exactly why it would be an issue, even if you're higher than your tvachim. But Kitzur, the Rebbe ends off by saying an interesting nekuda. I guess you could count this as your farbringen for 8 days. That the Rebbe says that when it comes to Inyan Mesiris, when it comes to Inyan Pikuach Nefesh, that none of that would really matter. Obviously, the Frierdiker Rebbe, according to normal things, should have taken that boat, the train, because even if it is okay or if it's not okay, it's not the conversation. You're dealing with any situation that he stays in Galus. What could happen? They could change their mind in a second. They could tell him he has to stay. The nachalnik, as he was called, that means the local guy who thinks he's the big macher, he could decide he wants to make an accident happen. Who knows? You get out of there as soon as you can. But the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't. He decided he wants to stay, even though there are some shittas that it was a problem, it isn't a problem, it didn't matter. That wasn't the point. So the Rebbe says why. So the Rebbe explains why. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe basically operated in a way, a Mesiris Nefesh. That was the whole dir, if you want to call it, of the Frierdiker Rebbe was basically the whole avodah that was Mesiris Nefesh. All the Yidden were all the Tziddim that were open up yeshivas and everything was all Mesiris Nefesh. And the Frierdiker Rebbe himself also. So even though halachically, technically, the Frierdiker Rebbe could have left, and it would have made sense. So even though the Frierdiker Rebbe could have gone, but he didn't, because the whole operation of how the Frierdiker Rebbe operated was with Mesiris Nefesh. And therefore, even if there was a technical leeway, but he didn't do it. So anyways, you could see from here that sometimes the halacha could tell you that you should do something. But sometimes you have to know that, obviously not to go against halacha, for sure. But sometimes there's an inyan to operate at a different level. You operate in a way of Mesiris Nefesh. And, person's hungry, you could eat outside of a sukkah. Technically, you could. Halachically, you're allowed to, especially if it's a snack. But as Chassidim, we don't eat anything outside of a sukkah. Not even water, not even anything. So even though halachically, so here you see, again, another representation of the same thing. And maybe you could say this is considered that you're going outside the tchum, or it's not going outside the tchum, but you would take the same rules from the ship and you would apply it to a train. Happens to be for the train, if I remember correctly, I think over there the Rebbe proves that it's really the chumrah based on maybe some sefer, I don't remember exactly, that it basically should have been the chumrah. But either way, the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't want to do it, regardless, because of a Mesiris Nefesh behavior. 1 second, yeah.
What extent is it?
It's a good question. There's different levels in general. There's Letzerach Harbe, as we had by Mir Lahakom. There's Hefsemiruba. So there's always different things. Letzerach means that there's a need. A need means you're not just going to relax, but there's a need. You want to go for there's a reason why you have to be somewhere or something. That's a need. It doesn't say Letzerach Harbe. There has to be a big need. Well, no, you could ask someone, but a person knows for themselves. Why are you going there? Is this something that you need or something that you want? If someone says in class, I have to go get water. Do you need water or do you want water? Sometimes people say, I need. I can't function. Sometimes you do. Need doesn't mean that your mom is. Need doesn't mean that if you don't have it, you're going to die. Need means that there's a very, very, like a person is so parched and thirsty they can't. Right. So, but here it doesn't say that. Here just let's say
absolute necessity.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Let's say that just means. Let's say it means for a purpose. Okay. Yes. You got a question? Okay, next. Sif Gimel. Heicha. Let's go further. I want to finish. We have two sifim left. Let's finish this before the end today. Yeah. Okay. Sif Gimel. Heicha demuter lahafli b'sfina ber Shabbos. When?
Long ago. I was getting it.
Okay, Sif Gimel. Heicha demuter lahafli b'sfina ber Shabbos. When we say that you're allowed to go on a boat from before Shabbos. So im nichnes ba be'erev Shabbos. Let's say you go on the boat before Shabbos starts. V'yashav sham ad chashekha, and you sit there until it becomes Shabbos. So now, afal pisha chazer lebeis. So even though later on Shabbos itself, you go back to your house because it's parked in the city, but long bebeisa and you sleep comfortably in your own house. So now there's another problem. Can you go on the boat on Shabbos? So here he says, mutter likanis ba achar kach b'yom Shabbos. You could still go back on the boat on Shabbos itself. So if you, as long as the boat is not traveling only for Yidden on Shabbos, you could go back on. So again, you were on the boat when Shabbos started. So now you are comfortably settled. It's your place. Then you go off the boat after Shabbos starts, back to your house. You sleep there. Later on, you're allowed to go back on that boat on Shabbos itself. Again, as long as it's not going just for Yidden. Now the Alter Rebbe is not so comfortable with this thing. We'll see in the next sip, but just to give you a heads up, the Alter Rebbe is not so comfortable with going on any boat on Shabbos itself, because every time you go on a boat and it moves, it looks like you're swimming. Like we said before, it's the same zeta as swimming. So, but either way, but for the Kitzur now, he's saying that this is the way you can do it. You could be on the boat when Shabbos starts, you're kainer shvisasei, which means that you bought your place, and then you can leave and come back later. Now, but because in this situation, you are in your house on Shabbos itself, so kana shvisa bebeisoi. So now you establish that you're home for Shabbos. So even though you're going to go on the boat and we let you, but if that boat is going to go outside the Tchum Shabbos, now again, you're probably higher than your Tvachim in all. Then and it comes to dry land on Shabbos, it docks somewhere else. You're only allowed to walk outside that boat. You're not allowed to go any further than that. Why? Because at some point in Shabbos you were in your house, which means that your default place is your house. So even though we let you go back on the boat, because when Shabbos started, you were there, so you also sort of got your rights to it. But when it docks, you can't go more than Dalet Amis because your place is your house. And now you're outside the Tchum. So you only get your small little square. Let's just finish Dalet and then we'll take questions because it's continuation. Now, let's say a person wants to go on a ship in order to be able to daven with the minyan. So sometimes you had one city on one side of the river and another city on the other side of the river, and one city had Yidden and one didn't, and you were in the one that didn't have Yidden, and you want to go to the other side to catch a minyan. So if the boat is going for Goyim, it has a schedule that it goes back and forth like ferries. They have a full schedule. So yesh lahatir, then you could do it because, as we said before, it's not going for you, it's going for itself. And you were there when Shabbos started, so you'd be able to. But as we said in the last sip, you should make sure you're there when Shabbos starts. And be there until it gets dark, until night. Then you can go back to your house, like we said before. Let's skip, we'll come back to Alter Rebbe in a second. But let's say the boat's there, it's not going anywhere. When you get on the boat, then the captain says, whatever, let's go. That you can't do, because he's going for you, in lahatir, that you're not allowed to do. Now let's go back a second to the parentheses and read what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says, well, das Rabbeinu, ha'ikor sha'asr. The Alter Rebbe says, like we said in the last sip, that really to go on a boat on Shabbos, you shouldn't do. The whole case we spoke about till now was you were on the boat, two things. We said either you went on a trip before Shabbos, right? And then you came home, or you're on the boat on Shabbos and you left from Wednesday and on, no good. Or you went on the boat, or you went on the boat and it was going on Shabbos. But here we're saying something else. Or you went on the boat and you went off the boat and you went on, But here we're talking about something else. We're talking about going on the actual boat on Shabbos. So we're not saying, according to the Kitzur, you could, if you were there, you left, you come back. But the Alter Rebbe is really not okay with people going on the actual boat on Shabbos. Don't go on the boat. Ella, but the way the Alter Rebbe writes it is he explains that it's usher and it looks like you're swimming and you're not allowed to go on a boat on Shabbos. But then he says there are opinions that say it's mutter. Now, v'chein ispashet hanoyeg b'tzas mekaymes. And that's the minig that was accepted. That people taka do go on boats. This is what the Alter Rebbe says. And therefore, ve'ein limchos biyadam, you shouldn't tell people that are doing it not to. Again, the Alter Rebbe himself says don't do it. But people do. There are opinions that say, and people do. So the Alter Rebbe says don't stop someone from doing it, but know to yourself that you shouldn't do it. Now, happens to be that in today's day and age, this already, everyone agrees that it's for sure usher for many reasons. Some of the reasons, like we mentioned, that there's everything works on electricity. It means there's always malachas happening. It's not even a chance not, as we'll see next week. So therefore, nowadays it's already accepted. I'll give you another example. It used to be that people would take the train on Shabbos, right? Maybe it was in cities that had certain different types of trains. Maybe it was the over, the under, whatever. And they wouldn't pay necessarily, or they would carry their thing with them, their ticket, and after Shabbos deal with it if there was an Erev. But and people did, and there were reasons why it's not going for you. It's not. But Poil, nowadays, I don't think any from Yid would say, or any Rav would say, oh yeah, you could go on a train if you live in Manhattan, you want to catch a minion, you could hop on the train and take it a few stops. Things develop, but in terms of what was, are there opinions that maybe you could? I mean, I don't think anyone today would say that. And the same thing here. Amal, did they ever go on a boat? Did they ever travel? So again, the Alter Rebbe says, according to him, you should never do it. But even those that did, in those times, they would be, the Alter Rebbe would say, leave them, they're doing whatever they want to follow. But nowadays, I don't think anyone would do it, and I think that this would be pretty much accepted, that you would be meicha, that you would tell someone they shouldn't be there, if that was the case. Okay, any questions?
Those are